Sit down, world. I'm a shorter than average girl from down under, and today we're going to be looking at the sixth book in the Del Toro Quest series, The Maze of the Beast. I love this book. It is full of twists and mysteries. I mean, it's just fun. And it's got more doom, so I'm all here for it. And I was fully anticipating some crazy good anime episodes, but unfortunately the anime didn't deliver. The changes led to a very different tone in the story compared to that in the book. The major theme of the Maze of the Beast is trust. How it forms, how it breaks, and its consequences on the human psyche, which is a theme that bleeds into the next two books of the series. So it's very important for this topic to be introduced well enough to be expanded on later. Something I believe the book did really well. So if you're here for the book review, you can skip to the time shown on the screen right now, or the timestamp in the description, whichever suits you best. But for now, let's talk stories. Starting off with the actual plot, the trio are walking inconspicuously to their next destination when they find these two twin girls drowning in the river. Being the virtuous bunch they are, they decide to go and save them. And as Barda is resuscitating Marie, the other twin Ida is shot by Dane. You know, the saboteur from the Rhythmia games? Yeah. And a good thing too, because in the other corner, Marie is strangling out Barda. So think about what Ida could have done to leave Jasmine. And this is where we and the trio are introduced to Owls, shapeshifters made by the Shadow Lord to do his bidding. Mostly espionage. So they're literally owls everywhere looking for a man, a boy, and a wild girl with a black bird. We then get some more deets about owls from the Resistance, and we find out that there are 3 levels of owls. Level 1s can shapeshift into living things that they see, but they must always travel in pairs, and they are very cold, they can't eat or drink, and they have the Shadow Lord's mark in a spot which you can easily find. Not to mention, they have to take a break from being that form every 3 days, something the Resistance calls tremors. Now, level 2s are more crafty than level 1s. They basically do the same thing, but they don't have to travel in pairs. They can pretend to eat and drink, and they also can make themselves feel warmer to the touch and hide the Shadow Lord mark on them. But they also have to tremor every 3 days. And then there are level 3s, which at the moment we don't get much information about, only the fact that they can shapeshift into inanimate objects as well. But anyways, during their fight with the owl, Dane gets injured, having possibly broken his arm and ribs. So the trio decide to take him to a Resistance stronghold to get him some help. But of course, the stronghold has quite the security, including a daily password. But because Dane was knocked out, he couldn't help them. But eventually, Leaf figures it out using some quality brand honey, which he finds in Dane's pack. And then the guy who opens the door ends up being a jester from the palace, so he knows Barda and Barda's past as a guard. And so he goes and tells everyone, which throws a lot of shade at Barda, because on the night the Akbar was attacked, every single one of the guard was killed, which means that Barda either made a deal with the Shadow Lord to save his life, or that he is potentially an owl that looks like Barda. Foreshadowing. So this kind of started to create some tension between the trio and the members of the Resistance. And even better yet, Gluck shows up. And he and Jasmine hit it off swimmingly. Not. So this added even more tension to the stronghold. And then Doom arrives. And basically he confronts Dane for letting these non-tested members know the secret of the password. But as we know, Dane didn't tell them anything. So Leaf confesses that he figured it out all on his own, and then wonders why it was such a big deal that the Resistance are getting Queen Bee honey. And so this is when Doom orders their arrest. He tells them that it is forbidden to trade with the Resistance. And so for the safety of Queen Bee and her sons, they will have to test to see whether Leaf, Barda, and Jasmine are owls or not by keeping them confined in a room for 3 days. The issue is that this was just an excuse. Dane had already told the trio that Doom could identify a level 1 or level 2 old just by looking at it. And Dane didn't believe that level 3s existed either, so yeah. Leaf suspected that Doom just wanted to keep them there so that he could figure out what they're doing. You know, like he did back in the Rithmir games. But now it's by force. But Dane ain't having that. So after an uncertain amount of time, Dane tells the three that the 3 days have passed and that Doom is delaying their freedom. But if they promise to take Dane to where he wants to go, which is the city of Torah, then he would free them right there and then. And so, of course, the nincompoops agree. So off they go, running from the Resistance, not knowing how much time has actually passed, and certainly not clearing their name. And then this is when the trio asks Dane why he wants to go to Torah, which causes Dane to get angry and gaslight the three. Oh, they do not trust him after he saved their life twice, that he had betrayed Doom for them, that they had lied about ever wanting to go to Torah, which, by the way, they never said that they did. He says that he believed that they were the real deal and that fate had brought them together, but now they are betraying everything that he knew about them. And oh, how they're letting him down. What an absolute charmer. But still, the trio keep their word and decide to take Dane to Torah, and so they don't get in trouble with some owls again, they decided to split up. Jasmine, Philly, and Cree are traveling on their own, and then Barda, Leaf, and Dane are together. But because they don't have Cree or Jasmine to listen to the trees, the boy gang is being left behind. Like, to the extent when they reached the ransacked village of where waters meet, they found a message from Jasmine saying that she had already passed there 3 days ago. And it's here that they bump into the Queen Bee's son, Stephen, a traveling trader who buys and sells all these odd knickknacks. Feeling bad for him, Dane ends up buying a pot, Leaf 2 bags of toffee, and Barda this beautifully embroidered fabric belt. And when Dane falls asleep, Barda actually gives this belt to Leaf, telling him to hide the belt of Del Toro inside while they're traveling with him. So before he puts the belt away, Leaf touches the opal so that he could figure out where the Maze of the Beast actually is along the coast, and he sees it for the first time. The next day, they find a ferry dock and wait for the ferry to come. The captain and his polypan greet them warmly, not, and then they become acquainted with all the other travelers. A couple, Lucky the Stripe and his music box, 2 card players, and a posh lady with her parasol.
Jasmine,
Yeah, Leaf was impressed. But of course, things aren't going to be easy peasy because they're woken up by pirates. The 2 card players are like brutally murdered. So, of course, the boy gang weren't going to stand for it and they fought against the pirates. Unfortunately, Barda gets thrown overboard, Dane gets taken for ransom, and the pirates take the belt off Leaf. But when the pirates went to attack Jasmine, Craig goes to defend her. And as soon as the woman from the couple sees a girl fighting with a black bird, she reveals herself to be an owl and attacks Jasmine and Leaf. Luckily, the captain saves their life just in time, but now that he knows the owls are chasing them, he kicks them off the ferry. Grieving for poor Barda and the belt, Leaf was in no mood for Jasmine's haste to chase the pirates, and that's when...
Barda!
Yep, the worms hadn't ended him after all, but unfortunately the pirate that went down with him wasn't so lucky. In the pirate's pocket, they end up finding a map to the Maze of the Beast. Yep, seems like the pirates are after the rare gem as well. So now it's a chase to the finish line. And they eventually make it there to a cave, but both Leaf and Jasmine are a bit concerned about Barda. He's just not his usual self. In the cave, they end up finding this giant hole with footprints all around, and then inside there's like a little box made out of shells, which is empty, and a note scrolled on another version of the map that they have. The note was from Doom. And get this, the note mentions that there was a gem inside that shell box. So Jasmine is livid that Doom has not only guessed what they're up to, but has handed over the gem deliberately to the pirates. As for Barter, he goes absolutely depresso, telling them to give up on the quest. And that's when Leaf notices Jasmine has drawn her dagger, and when he's turning around to see why, there's a flash that goes past him, and Barda has a sword to his chest by none other than Barda. So it turns out that they had been traveling with an owl this entire time, and the real Barda had followed them, and just in time to rescue the quest. Hallelujah! But then they get captured by pirates. Hallelujah? Well, actually that was good, cause it got them to Dane and the belt. Leaf uses his toffees to get the polypan to get him the belt back. As for the gem inside the box, the polypan has never heard of it. And when they mention that gem, both Dane and a pirate named Milne, who was now tied up next to them for being a traitor, got super intrigued. So Leaf shows them the note, and Milne just sniggers at it. Before being able to inquire why, the trio and Milne get thrown into a hole, which leads to the Maze of the Beast. A beautiful cave full of stalactites and stalagmites, and of course, a giant, sharp teeth, large spiked slug named the Gloss. Now, despite being almost blind and almost deaf, this slug was a sharpshooter, and given that the caves are like half submerged with water, any move would alert the Gloss. But there's another catch as well. The cave walls actually produce this like white milky stuff, which petrifies anything which is still. So if Gloss doesn't get you, the place will. So of course Milne freaks out and the trio rescue him, and then he freaks out again and Glutz gets him.
Milne.
The only thing that the trio can do is just walk around slowly searching for a way out. And that's when Leaf feels the belt get warm again. Yep, the gem wasn't in the box, it was right here, inside one of the stone columns. And so while Barda and Jasmine were distracting the Gloss, Leaf is carving out the amethyst and puts it on the belt. And that's when he feels like a blow of wind, and he keeps breaking off pieces of the cave wall where he felt that until he makes an exit. As Gloss is like trying to mend that hole that Leaf has just made, the trio make it out, escape through a blowhole, and it ends up taking up some of the pirates that were chasing them anyway. So for all those who've watched the anime, yeah, it's very different. They added so many plot points and subtracted others to the degree that my man Doom was made out to be the villain. And Dane be competing with Leaf for Jasmine's affection. No! They're messing with the two things that are very dear to me in the Delta Request universe. So, please. In the anime, Dane is a lot more pleasant and likable, whereas Doom is a lot more tyrannical, so it's easier to pick a side. They do this by making Dane a total fanboy of the trio, and then they remove the whole Queen Bee reveal in the Stronghold, instead giving Doom lines like,
I think you've got some explaining to do.
I wasn't talking to you, was I? All of you get undressed. Because while you're here, I am the law.
There's a lot more Dane and Trio interactions in the anime, and they also show us the time that has passed in the stronghold, confirming that Doom has left them for 3 days, whereas that's not really confirmed in the books. And then there's the whole Dane Jasmine romance. Ugh. To add to that, there are a lot of other differences made, which kind of leaves things making not much sense. For one, when Dane pushes Leaf on the River Queen.
Ow! Hey, what'd you do that for?
And then there's the whole map that Barda finds on the deck. Like, how in the world did they know that leads to the Maze of the Beast? And then you've got all the subtle hints that Barda is an owl.
What's the matter? We'll buy another one. The Belt of Del Toro? Of course I'm right, Jasmine. Because I know exactly what to do in every situation. Wow, am I hungry. Come on, let's eat. I think the fish look ready.
What do you mean? They're raw. They need another 10 minutes.
I was gonna say that, one step at a time. You've got to stack them one step at a time. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6. The higher we stack them, the closer we get.
Barda?
Leaf, you need to get some rest. Tomorrow's gonna be a long day, and you'll need all of your strength.
Barda! Come on, hurry up! Are you feeling sick or something?
Oh, no, I'm all right. I was just doing a bit of thinking, that's all.
The random treasure chest that Leaf thinks has the gem in it, because there's no note or anything, so it just doesn't make sense at all. And then killing, arguably, the strongest, yet dumbest, guardian of all 7 of them. Not to mention just everything which happens in the Maze of the Beast. And now that I know that Emily Rodda approved the anime plot, I'm not sure why all those changes were made, but I'm hoping that it all ties up together at the end, so I'll just have to wait and see. This story isn't meant to have like a huge moral discussion or anything. It's meant to set up for one later. But rather, it opens our eyes to an important point. How do humans trust? We get to explore a plethora of characters which represent different angles of this discussion, from the Resistance, and specifically Doom and Dane, to Ols and Polypan and Steven and the pirates. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to discuss everything today because of time and, more importantly, spoilers, but we'll do what we can. Surprisingly, everyone is super important to this discussion except the Guardian. So before we get into the topic of trust, I just want to quickly talk about the Glass. Because, like the Hive, the Glass is the only other Guardian that isn't defeated in the book. And it's also a natural organism which pre-existed the Shadow Lord and had no idea of his existence, like the Hive. The biggest difference, though, between the Glass and the Hive is that it didn't even know of the gem's existence. So when the trio went into the Maze of the Beast, they were literally nothing but prey for the Glass. And so when they escaped, it was absolutely fair game. He didn't want to go after them and jeopardize his living space, by letting salt water into it, because slugs and salt don't mix very well. In the Del Toro Book of Monsters, we kinda get given a hint about Gloss's possible origins. There's this Tauran folk song called Little Ina. It talks about a girl who finds a sea worm egg. When it hatches, her mum sees the worm and is absolutely terrified, telling her daughter to take the worm back to sea. But this makes Ina upset, and she decides to run away to the sea with the slug. And that's when a big wave pushes little Ina into a hole, and she's never seen again. People say that the worm grew up to be the Glass, protecting Ina with its webs of bone-white stone. Absolutely tragic. Although we've drawn many comparisons between the Hive and the Glass, if this story is true, then it also has similarities to Goral, set in a single goal, doing what he could to achieve it, with the Shadow Lord taking advantage of that and dropping the gem there, knowing that the creature's hellbent goal would mean that he would pose no threat to the Shadow Lord, whilst also being the best way to protect the gems from those who are trying to get their hands on them. And that's literally all there is with the glass. He's not the antagonist of the story, just as the Hive wasn't the antagonist of the Shifting Sands. Instead, it's human nature again. In the Shifting Sands, survival was the cause of all mischief for our trio. Here, it is who to trust. Now that they know that the Shadow Lord is looking for them and discovering that there are spies everywhere in the form of shape-shifting owls, calculating risk of exposure, both physical and intellectual, is something that our three companions are doing constantly. Starting off with them traveling undercover and not letting Kree fly too high at the beginning of the book. The discovery of owls then adds an extra dimension to this issue. And so that's when trust comes in. Now, the basic definition for trust is a firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. Now, that's all nice and all, but when we talk about trust between individuals, it's important to take in the psychology of trust. Dr. Hancock defines trust as an individual's calculated exposure to the risk of harm from the actions of another, which is what we'll be focusing on today. Because trust that comes from belief is a discussion on belief predominantly, which we've seen through Leaf and his trust in the Bell throughout the series. But that's not going to be our major discussion today. Trust is a relationship. It needs the minimum of 2 participants, but that doesn't mean that trust needs to go both ways. For trust, you need a truster, someone who is giving their trust, aka increasing their risk of exposure, and a trustee, a recipient of this trust or exposure. Sometimes both participants are trusters and trustees, which then makes it a two-sided relationship, but more often than not, it's usually one-sided. Generally speaking, the work is done by the trustee to gain the trust of the truster, rather than the truster looking for people to expose themselves to. And so perception is everything. There are things that people do or characteristics that people have which make them more trustworthy. But at the end, it also depends on the truster and how trusting they are, which are also determined by their characteristics and ability. So let's start with the trustee. Number 1, reliability. They must prove to the truster that there won't be an increase in risk due to them. Both Doom and Dane do this by putting their necks on the line to save the trio. Doom after the Rhythmia Games, and Dane with the owls. Number 2, transparency. This means both telling the truth and convincing the truster of your goals. That way, they A, know that you are telling the truth, and B, they can start imagining a future with this relationship because they now have a vision of where you want to go and so can fit themselves into that puzzle, which is a win-win for the trustee because now they're actually imagining this happening. Doom is not very good at this at all. I mean, his experience and role as the head of the resistance means that he is not quick to open up, making him very opaque. On the other hand, Dane first tells them how to get to the resistance stronghold, tells them that he wishes to go to Torah, and opens up about his mother being torn, which is a lot more transparency, but not complete, as he doesn't tell them the reason why he wants to go to Torah. But we did mention a super important factor of a trustee when we talked about Doom. Reputation, influence, and second-hand trust. Given that Doom is a higher rank in the Resistance than Dane, he kinda takes the point on this one. And then there is predictability. As we mentioned in the Shifting Sands analysis, predictability only comes from what we know. So it stands to reason that predictability increases the more that you know about someone. Now, the reason why predictability would influence trust at all is because trust is a measure of risk. The more you know, the better your measurement or assessment will be. So, for example, Dane helping Leaf and Barta fighting off the pirates and the River Queen would have increased their trust in him. Not only because he helped them out, but because he's confirming what they expected of him, giving them the impression that they know him. On the other hand, the note found in the cave, which was supposedly written by Doom, reduced their trust in him significantly because they hadn't expected for him to figure out what they were doing, let alone why he would be betraying them like this. Spoilers, the note is fake, aiming to reduce their trust in Doom. So it worked. And speaking of reduced trust, another factor is expertise and skills. Usually, the more skilled, the more trustworthy. But interestingly, in this series, the trio's trust in Doom doesn't increase when they realize
He fights like a madman. He couldn't care less what happens to him, even if he's injured or worse. It's like he's got nothing to lose.
And that's because that fighting style brings significant risk, which they don't want. Whereas Dane's fear of Glock in the games and then his injuries to Leaf made him appear weaker, so less of a risk if he wasn't going to be on their side. As a trustee, appearing non-threatening but useful really helps. And then there is personality. We prefer to form relationships with more agreeable people. People who are benevolent, committed, empathetic, particularly to the truster, and have integrity. Both Doom and Dane show these qualities, but for Doom, he doesn't do it to the trio. Instead, we see these qualities shine through when he's protecting Queen Bee and her sons. Whereas, of course, with Dane, it was directed towards the trio. And finally, the most superficial of all the ways to gain trust, it's appearance. And here we're not just talking about physical appearance, but we're also talking about culture and race. Although Doom is tan, that's not the thing which makes the trio wary of him. It's the scar on his face, because it suggests to them that he's not being very honest about his past and that he has been in super dangerous situations before, something the trio want no part in. But when it comes to Dane, the fact that he is half Tauren increased Leaf's trust in him for the dumbest of reasons. Number one, because the Tauren tribe have a special connection to the royal household and swore allegiance to them. Number two, because Arden fell in love with a Tauren woman. And number three, because Sharn is Tauren, which kind of makes Leaf suspect that Dane could possibly be the heir to the throne. But this is all speculation in Leaf's head, which is why it is so dumb, because in essence, Leaf is being biased towards Taurens because of the stories that he's heard, not because he's ever met a Tauren and interacted with one. As we said, trust goes both ways, and so the trusters have characteristics which make them less or more susceptible to trusting. These include the number of meaningful interactions with the trustee, expertise and competence, previous experience, situational awareness, self-confidence, influence, and culture. Of our trio, Jasmine is the least trusting, which is attributed to her high level of self-reliance. She literally has all the above characteristics to a T, excluding culture, and that is why in the anime, Dane has to put in the extra mile to get Jasmine's trust. Leaf, on the other hand, is far too trusting, owing predominantly to the fact that he has little experience. Most of Leaf's upbringing was theoretical, so he has a huge brain and personality, but none of the other stuff, which makes Leaf a really good trustee, not so much a truster. And then you've got Barda, who's in the middle. But in this entire conversation about trust, we are missing one crucial point: context. You see, you don't need to trust someone all the time, but just in certain contexts. We see this in a quick example between Leaf and Chet, the polypan. Leaf has what the Polypan wants, the toffees, and Chet has the skills that Leaf needs to get the belt back. So he trusts Chet to get him the belt of Deltora in exchange for toffees. This type of context-specific trust works and isn't cheating given that both sides agree to its extent. When they don't, it gets more complicated. We easily see this with the pirates. They work together towards a common goal and set the parameters. Overstepping one of those and you're classified as a traitor, like Mill. And so when Leaf tries to use Doom's note to break the pirates' trust in each other, it doesn't work because they know each other better than Leaf knows them, and so they don't take his accusations seriously, indicating the level of trust that exists between them. And then the resistance. So we see that the trio trusted Doom enough back in the Shifting Sands that they wanted him as a future ally, but they didn't trust him enough to share their request, aka having established the parameters of their relationship with him. But Doom didn't approve of those parameters, and so he digs harder, shall we say. The same applies to Dane. As part of the resistance, they also would like to have him as an ally in the future, but they weren't willing to go the next step and share their request with him. But to make sure that they don't lose Dane as an ally by breaking their word to him, they have put themselves in a situation where the context of their relationship was changing. Dane will be traveling with them now, which means they're going to get a lot more personal. So Barda sets the boundary for this context by purchasing the embroidered belt for Leaf to hide the belt of Deltora in. As Barda says,
It's not that I don't trust Dane, I just don't think it'd hurt to be extra careful while we travel with him.
Which means that within the context of being allies against the Shadow Lord, they trusted Dane. But they shouldn't be changing that just yet because Dane hasn't gained their trust in other contexts. So if Dane wants to get closer, he's gonna need to work a bit harder. At the end of it, we learn that it's okay to put boundaries on how far we trust someone, defining the level of relationship we want with others based on the risk that it will bring. And we learn what we must do to be trusted. So when it comes to building relationship, it's important to keep in mind our reliability, transparency, reputation and influence, predictability, skills and expertise, personality, and physical appearance and culture, which will play a part in how the relationship forms from outside of the equation. And when it comes to trusting someone else, know that your expertise, influence, experience, culture, awareness, and confidence will also have a part to play in that. This is a top-notch story. It really opens up some great questions about characters which the reader would just want to jump into the next book to get some answers. With regards to lessons and stuff, it's difficult to isolate any because of all the books in the series so far. It's the one that definitely depends on previous context and acts as a setup for the future. But if you want a condensed version of the takeaways, just go back to the summary of the analysis for this book, and that will give you the bare bones of it all. The anime poses the same questions as the book does, but it's in an entirely different tone. So I think it is still worth checking out the book, even if you haven't. It'll definitely be worth the read. So that is the 6th book of Deltora Quest, The Maze of the Beast. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on next week's Deltora Quest reactions and more analyses coming soon. Please share this with any other Deltora Quest or fantasy enthusiasts. Be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.